Hello, Georgetown fans, and welcome into episode 4 of the Gtown Breakdown. This is going to cover the game between Leander and Georgetown that occurred this past Friday on September 26th, and it was a heck of a game. Offense was locked in, defense was locked in, a bunch of plays all around, a lot of stuff to get into. So without wasting any more time, let's start. So your final, Georgetown 58, Leander 27, and we really saw the offensive explosion that's been kind of teased, been hinted at a couple times this first couple weeks. It all came flooding in this past Friday night. Offense completely dominated this game. Defense was totally on point for the majority of the game as well. And so there was a lot to get into. This might be a little bit of a long recap because there's, again, a ton of big plays that occurred, a lot of stuff to talk about. So I'll try my best to fly through it. But again, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good things we saw from the Eagles, a lot of things to work on as always. And this game recap is going to have a lot of fun stuff. So, interestingly, the coin toss was the first point of emphasis that I had because Georgetown won the toss and elected to receive. And we've seen this a couple times from Georgetown these past couple years when their offense has been highly powered and highly potent, that they will win the coin toss and elect to get the ball. Or even if they don't win the coin toss, natural football logic kind of indicates that you want to kick when you win the coin toss to get defense on the field first, which actually plays into Georgetown's offensive philosophy because what they want to do is get the ball and then score immediately with their offense to put the other team in a deficit right away on the first drive. And so we saw that from Georgetown again. They elected to receive the ball, get offense first, and they immediately went down the field and scored a touchdown. It was 10-play drive, 75-yard touchdown drive that went into the end zone by a Jet Walker 4-yard touchdown run. They actually went for 2 after that touchdown. So I'll touch on the 2-point conversions a little bit later. But after that, they ended up getting the 2-point conversion, and the first score of the game made it 8-0.
Walker to the right of McDougal. Warren in motion. Direct snap to Walker. Right up the right side. Touchdown! Georgetown!
Back to the swinging gate formation for the Eagles.
Snap back. Jet Walker, right side. Gets outside one of the defenders into the corner of the end zone. And the 2-point conversion is good.
And right after that, they actually went onside kick, a surprise onside right after the first drive of the game and recovered. It was a huge recovery by Malachi Miller, who laid out and just dove full length, full extension to grab the loose football to secure another offensive possession for your Eagles.
Malachi Miller gets it. What a play. Malachi Miller jumps on the loose ball.
And then they wasted no time. 8 plays, 54-yard drive, another touchdown. This one was from McDougal to Xavier Warren at the touchdown throw. This is another 2-point conversion that occurred after the score. They got that as well. So a 16-0 ball game before Leander even touched the football on offense.
Walker to the right side of McDougal. Tight formation on the far side hash mark. Snap. Pitch it to Warren around the end. Breaks the tackle in the backfield. Has a block for Warren. Touchdown, Georgetown. Jet Walker gets out there and lays the block for Xavier Warren. And the Eagles lead it 14-0. Walker in the backfield. Guyton to his right. Snap to Walker right up the middle and into the end zone for the 2-point conversion.
Leander's first drive was pretty effective, and it is important to note that Georgetown actually went onside once again. This time Leander got it, and they end up getting a short field as a result. They had a 44-yard drive, and it took them 15 plays to drive the length of half the length of the football field, that is. They also needed 4 separate 4th down conversions, including one by penalty, to continue their drive, and ultimately it led to a 4-yard Mason Montgomery QB keeper into the end zone. They also went for 2 and did not get it, so the final score after that was 16-6.
2 receivers left, 1 right. Now 1 in motion to the right side. He'll stop in the slot. Now back in motion again. Fake, handoff. Nope, Montgomery has it. He's scrambling for his life. Pressure's on. Montgomery's running. And he's wide open into the end zone. Over pursuit. And he pays. Makes the defense pay. It's a touchdown for the Lions. And now the extra point attempt. They're going to go for 2. Late shift in the... and it's going to be a run. It's slammed to the ground. No good.
And then after a bit of discombobulation on the kick returned by Georgetown, they ended up having the ball at their own 7-yard line and still made short work of it. They went 93 yards in 14 plays. Jet Walker had 56 yards on that drive. He also had a 3-yard touchdown run, his second of the game. And they ended up going for 2 once again, succeeded once again, and the score was 24-6.
Buffet killers into the end zone. 2-point conversion is good.
After Jet Walker's second touchdown to put him up 24-6, Leander got the ball back and ended up going 3 and out. Tennyson Dean had a big sack on third down to force Leander to punt, the first punt of the ball game. And then Georgetown ran the 2-minute drill to perfection. They had 1:47 left in the half. They ended up going 58 yards in 6 plays and capped it off with a McDougal throw to Braylon Westfall for a 6-yard touchdown. They went for a PAT this time, so the halftime score was 31-6.
Second, third, big second down here with the time running out. There's a receiver in the end zone. Touchdown! What a beautiful catch in the end zone.
So as the touchdown earlier, Georgetown started with the ball after electing to receive the first half kick, meaning that Leander starts with the football in the second half. They actually returned this kick to the 40-yard line, which was a pretty recurring theme in this game. However, they weren't able to do anything with it. They ended up actually turning the ball over in the first 4 plays, right back to Georgetown, who made short work of it. They went for 47 yards in 4 plays. They had a 30-yard touchdown from McDougal to Copeland Madre to put the score to 38-6 early in the third quarter.
And now the Eagles quickly back to the line. Snap, fake the handoff to Walker. Pass across the middle. Caught. Madre juggling catch. Touchdown, Georgetown.
And then right as Georgetown seems to be taking over this football game, Leander responds with a kick return touchdown, 85 yards by Dominic Jaramillo. They actually get the 2-point conversion here as well. Makes the score 38-14. Then Leander responds in 12 seconds with that big kick return.
Georgetown shirt and embroidery. And it'll be Liam Capra booting it deep down the right side, fielded about the 15-yard line. Coming right now, back left, cutting up the middle, inside the numbers, now outside the numbers, outside the 40, and the chase is on. And Georgetown, there's a block in the back, no flag thrown, and it's going to be, there's the flag. And the kickoff return for a touchdown will be negated.
There's no foul. On the block in the back.
Well, and they've got to go for 2 here to try to cut this to 24-point lead.
Hand it to Gordon. He's going to be stretched out wide. Hit, breaks off the tackle, and he's going to get into the end zone.
Georgetown, though, refused to be outdone in this ball game. Right as Leander gets a spark, maybe gets some momentum back, they respond in 2 plays, a 56-yard touchdown strike to Braden Bratton. And that's a name Eagles fans are going to have to remember. He's got some wheels on him. A 56-yard touchdown to make it 45-14 and take all the momentum right back for the Eagles.
2nd and 10 for the Eagles. 2 receivers left, 1 right. Snap back. Hand it to Weston Stewart. Nope. Pass across the middle. Caught by Bratton. He's off to the races. 30, 20, 10, 5. Touchdown, Georgetown. Braylon Bratton, the sophomore, holds it in and takes it to the house.
The next drive, Leander, on their first play, Kamarion Gordon fumbles the ball, recovered by Easton Smith defensively. They steal another possession from Leander, and then they actually had to settle for a field goal, the first non-touchdown drive of the ball game after going 20 yards in 5 plays. Makes it 48-14 off the turnover.
Now Leander's going to have to throw the football. I know they'll try a few runs here and there, but at some point they're going to have to start trying to air this out. And if they do that, then Georgetown may be able to pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback.
Snap back. Gordon fumbles the ball. It's loose on the field. It's still loose, and Georgetown has it. On the near side hash mark, a 33-yard field goal attempt with 7 minutes remaining. Snap is back, the kick is up, and what a leg by Gallagher.
Wow, good
and
kick.
It's good. A 33-yard boot.
Leander then credits them. They're still fighting. They execute their best drive of the day. They go 68 yards in 11 plays. There's an 8-yard touchdown run by Kamarion Gordon. They end up going for 2, could not get it, so that score ends up being 48-20.
2nd and goal from the 8. Leander has it, far side hash mark. 1 receiver right, 2 left. Turn, handoff Gordon, right up the middle, finds a hole, keeps his footing after the hit, and into the end zone for the touchdown.
Leander has to go onside at this point late in the game. Georgetown recovers, and then they actually go 52 yards in 6 plays for another touchdown score. This was Caleb McDougal's 5th touchdown of the game to Copeland Madre, a 17-yard strike. PAT makes it 55-20.
McDougal ready to go. Play clock down to 5 seconds. Snap back, fake the handoff. Looking long, pressure comes. And McDougal took a shot. But a catch made. And Copeland Madre takes it into the end zone for the touchdown.
Credit to Leander. After that, they still kept fighting. They executed another long drive, 11 plays, 79 yards. This one was capped off by Mason Montgomery, a 1-yard QB keeper, and their score is 55-27 after the PAT was good.
Still playing their same game plan, and they're still going all out every play to try to claw into this game.
Montgomery fakes the handoff, keeps it, and strolls into the end zone for the Leander touchdown.
Leander has to go another onside kick. Georgetown recovers this one as well, so shout out to the hands team, 2 onside kick recoveries. They drive all the way down to Leander's 10 with mostly backups in that offense at this point, and they end up kicking a 27-yard field goal to make the score 58-27.
Will be spotted at the 17-yard line. A 27-yard field goal attempt. Snap back. The hold is down. The kick is up, and the field goal is good.
Leander on their final possession goes 3 and out, turns the ball over on downs, just kind of playing for pride, and then Georgetown ends up kneeling out the clock, making the final score 58-27. And in case you might have noticed based off of the recap, but the drive chart for Georgetown, just a quick rundown. They get the opening kick, touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, field goal, end of game. Georgetown had 10 drives in this ball game, and they scored on their first 9 of them. And the only time they didn't score, they could have scored, and there was a kneel out of the clock. I mean, you can't really do better than that offensively. I just have to give a huge shout out to this offense early. I'll get into their stats here in a minute, but 9 straight scoring drives at any level of football is just a ridiculous feat. And so a huge shout out to the guys up on offense for coming in with a game plan, executing it at a high level, and again, cannot express enough how impressive that is, especially to start the game with 6 straight touchdowns. I mean, that it's just unbelievable. So huge shout out to the offense. Offensively, the numbers for Georgetown were, as you can imagine, pretty remarkable. Throwing the ball, Caleb McDougal was 15 of 21 for 222 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had a long of 56 to Braden Bratton on his touchdown score. And Royal Mitchell came into the game. He was 2 of 4 for 30 yards. And a shout out to him. I know him. I used to play football with him at the park in the village. So good to see him still in the football field. Running the ball for your Eagles, Jet Walker had 18 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a long of 34 and averaged 5.8. Zach Guyton had 10 carries for 61, a long of 25, averaging obviously 6.1. And then Weston Stewart had 9 carries for 52 yards and a long of 26, averaging 5.8. And 2 things really stuck out to me of these numbers, one of which was the long. Walker having a long of 34, Guyton having a long of 25, and Stewart having a long of 26. All 3 of these main running backs were able to pop big runs. And when you have multiple guys who are still explosive and also play different styles of running back in particular, just different ways that they'll attack a defense, it just opens up so many different aspects for this offense. And I assume this will continue to grow because I imagine as they continue to get more reps and they get deeper into this offense, I think we're going to see this explosiveness not only continue, but expand and grow. And so these running backs are really going to be something to watch going forward. And the other thing is the carry total. I mentioned this in another episode in regards to how much work Walker's going to get. And I think this breakdown is kind of what I imagine going forward. Now, it's going to depend on the opponent, on who's playing well, and that sort of thing. So obviously not going to be always consistent. But I personally, I do like the breakdown. I like Jet having 18, Guyton having 10, and Stewart having 9. And those numbers are going to fluctuate again. But I do think that Walker, firstly, has earned the right to be the primary back and the starting running back because he is the reigning district MVP. He's really what makes this offense go to that next level. So obviously, he should get the most touches. But I do think that the optimal play and going through this district slate is to try to keep his workload from exceeding what should be expected of him. The game where he gets 30 carries and the other 2 running backs at 3 probably isn't going to be the best thing in the long run, just for either his health or the flow of the offense. So that is something to monitor going forward. I don't know for sure if that's going to be how Georgetown plays this running back room. It's just how I would play it. It was that kind of split in regards to about 50% of the snaps go to Walker, 50% are split between Guyton and Stewart. I think that's something that Georgetown should aspire to reach. Just from my perspective, again, I'm not sure how they want to play this going forward, and it's going to depend on a matchup basis. But something that to keep an eye on are those carry numbers. Receiving the ball for your Eagles was a big day because it was a big day for this offense. Xavier Warren had 7 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. Braden Bratton had 4 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown. Copeland Madre had 2 catches, 47 yards, and 2 scores. And then Braylon Westphal had 2 receptions, 14, and a touchdown. And he ultimately ended up leaving the game after at that touchdown reception in the first half. He seemed cleared. He still had all of his padding in his helmet. He did not return to the game in the second half as probably a precaution. So it's the reason why his numbers are a little bit lower. But he still made an impact in that first half when he was on the field. As far as some big picture numbers, Georgetown ran 66 plays for 480 yards at 7.3 a play. They ran the ball 41 times for 228 at 5.6 a carry, and they threw it 25 times for 252 yards, which is about 10 per throw. Their longest play was 56 yards, that touchdown to Braden Bratton, who, again, is a name we're going to have to remember. He came into this week with 0 touches on the season and ended up leading the team in receiving yards with his 94. He's clearly a speed threat and somebody that their offense really tried to instill in this the bye week, and we'll get into all that in a little bit later. But again, another name in this receiving core that we're going to have to keep an eye on because he made a name for himself last Friday night, and from my perspective, I think he played himself to a position where it's going to be hard to take him out of the lineup for any length of time. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Georgetown had 10 drives and scored on the first 9 of them. They only didn't score when they kneeled the ball out at the end of the game in plus territory where they could have scored but didn't really have a reason to. Georgetown had no turnovers or punts all game, and this is probably my favorite offensive number so far. McDougal has not been sacked in 4 games. He's not been sacked one time. And that is a credit to the offensive line. Obviously, it's a credit for McDougal to avoid the pressure and create plays when a play breaks down, play within the structure of the offense and not try to ad-lib too much. But because Georgetown's been able to avoid these big plays, in particular sacks, they are able to execute at as high of a level as we saw them this past Friday night. Sacks and holding calls are the big drive killers of an offense because a sack in particular, it's a loss of down and a loss of yardage. So now you have one less down to get whatever yard marker you need for a first. And a holding call, it's similar. You lose 10 yards, you still get the play, but now you're down 10 yards from where you were. It's going to be a lot harder to get that first down to continue that offensive drive. Because Georgetown has been able to avoid sacks in particular, it's allowed that offense to continue to stay on schedule, on pace, and play within their game plan because they don't have to force any 20-yard plays, 25-yard plays to get a first down. They can call those 20, 25-yard plays when they want to, not when they have to. And that makes the defense completely unaware of what's coming. It's a lot easier for a defense in particular, for example, if it's 3rd and 25 and you know that they have to get 25 yards in one play, you can play back. You can set up a defense to where you can take away that deep shot. But if they're never in a 3rd and 25, if it's a 1st and 10, or if it's a 2nd and 4, you can call those deep shots and the defense can't expect them to come because you could do anything at that point. It's a lot easier to game plan for those deep shots on a 3rd and long, on a 1st and long even, than it is to game plan for them on a 2nd and 4, on a 1st and 10, on a 3rd and 1. Because again, when you're ahead of the schedule offensively, you have the entire game plan, you have the entire playbook at your disposal, and that's what's really allowed this offense to take the next steps to becoming a totally elite unit. Finally, Georgetown was 6 of 8 on 3rd down. They had 32 first downs compared to Leander's 14, and they had 7 penalties for 64 yards. And penalties are not something that I've harped on a bunch on this show because I think penalties are really hard to remain consistent at a low level, mostly because it's reliant heavily on the referees. You can have an undisciplined team, but if the referees are calling everything really tight, you're going to have a high penalty game. If they're calling everything really loose and letting them play, you're going to have a low penalty game, assuming that you're not making, the boneheaded decisions. So the penalties I don't usually talk a bunch about unless they've been egregious, and I don't think they have been for your Eagles. They didn't come back and hurt this team terribly to a terrible degree. In fact, I think Leander's penalties were a lot worse. They allowed Georgetown to continue a lot more drives than Georgetown's penalties were. And so penalties haven't been a big issue for the Eagles, so I haven't spent a whole lot of time on them. Obviously, you want as little as possible. 7 for 64 isn't nothing. But again, didn't hurt the Eagles terribly much, so I'm not going to talk about them any farther than what the obvious stuff is, which is, hey, guys, can we get less penalties? Because naturally. Defensively, always I'll give this little shout out first. Tackles are kind of hard to track. They're not always going to be 100% accurate because I'm trying to watch who's making the play and enter their number. So if there's multiple players who collide at one time, it's going to be kind of tricky for me to determine who made first contact or who all was actually in that pile up, especially if there's 6, 7 guys that are all piling next to each other and trying to push the pile either way. Going to be kind of difficult. So take these with a grain of salt, but from what I got, my tackle leader for the day was Cole Mitchell with 7, and then multiple guys had 5. I had Malachi Miller with 5 in a TFL, Johnny Decker with 5, Gavin Smith with 5 in a TFL, Tennyson Dean with 4 in a sack. In total, the team had 5 total TFLs. They had 2 sacks. They had 5 passes defended, and they obviously had that fumble recovery, the only turnover of the game that wasn't a turnover on downs. Leander was 4 of 11 on third down, and this is something that Georgetown's actually been really, really good at, is the third down defense. So on the season, Georgetown has held their opponents to 34% conversion on third down, which is a remarkable number. That is very, very good, especially because offensively, they're averaging over 50% conversion on third down. And third down is one of the most crucial downs in the game. Obviously, there's only 4, fourth down being the most critical, third being probably right up there with fourth, in particular because third down is what really dictates what you do on fourth down. If you get sacked on a 3rd and 10, you might have to punt, rather than if you get a 9-yard completion on 3rd and 10, now you can go for it on that 4th down. So the offensive conversion rate for Georgetown has been really good, and the defensive stop rate on 3rd down has also been really good. But Georgetown's still kind of struggling on 4th down. Leander was 4 of 6. They had one of those conversions on a penalty, and Georgetown's allowing 70% conversion rate on 4th downs this season. So they've done a really good job forcing the other team that they're playing to get to 4th down. They're just not executing at that critical moment and getting them fully off the field and getting the ball back to their offense. And this is something that has been somewhat of an issue these past couple weeks. I remember Belton actually went 5 for 5 in that lone loss Georgetown has so far in the season. Copper's Cove was also at a very high efficiency, and now again 4 of 6 on 4th down for Leander. So this is something that's been a recurring theme, is those 4th down stops. And so something to kind of monitor going forward is how Georgetown continues to defend these. Do they play more aggressively? Do they play more conservatively? Do they change up a schematic? Something to monitor going forward. Big picture-wise, Leander ran 51 plays for 192 yards, averaging 3.88 play. They ran it 28 times for 86 yards, averaging 3.1, so below the 4-yard threshold. Mason Montgomery, the quarterback for Leander, was held to 9 completions on 23 attempts for 106 yards, no touchdowns. He did scramble the ball well for 12 carries, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Kamarian Gordon, though, is the most impressive thing to me about this Georgetown defense. Gordon is the running back for Leander. He came into this game popping. He was averaging 140 yards a game. He finished the game with 11 carries for 15 yards. He had the touchdown. He also lost a fumble. He was completely nullified from this game plan of Leander, which is helped by the fact that Leander had to throw the ball so much because they were down so quickly. But at the same time, the run defense for Georgetown really showed up in a big way, in particular after 2 weeks ago now against Copper's Cove. So big shout out to them. They held Leander to their longest play being 34 yards, which is below what Georgetown's was at 56, and not terrible for a high school football game. Not terrible for any level, really. 34 yards is an explosive, but it's not a backbreaker. And Leander also had 8 penalties for 79 yards. As far as MVPs go, we have some repeats this week, and I can't imagine it's a big shocker offensively. Defensively was tricky for about 5 minutes, and then I came to my answer. MVP-wise, offensively, for the second week in a row is Caleb McDougall, who completely has taken over these past 2 games on offense. And then defensively, once again, it's everybody. Caleb McDougall is my MVP for the Leander game. He, again, was 15 of 22 for 222 yards and 5 touchdowns. The past 2 weeks, he's been MVP. He was 72% completion percentage, 436 yards, 7 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. And because he's playing at such a high level, it's really allowed the entire offense to flourish around him. It's not like he's playing at a super high level and no one else is picking up the slack and he's just carrying the team to the finish line. Because he's playing that way, everyone else is excelling around him. He's called the bus driver for a reason. He drives the bus with all the weapons in the back, and he gets them all to the destination, and they all arrive at the same time because they're all playing at the same level. And so the running back room has been playing extremely well. The weapons are emerging and becoming more and more dangerous as the season has gone on. And it's really because McDougall is throwing the ball so well and playing within the structure and the scheme of this offense that he's really been able to take things to the next level these past 2 weeks. And I look for that to continue going forward as they continue to get more reps offensively. And I think that this offense might be in ascension mode where they've reached that ceiling, and then they're just going to keep bashing right into it or crashing through it and raising it even further. Because with how dominant they looked against Leander's football team last Friday, they're going to be able to ride that momentum or ride that wave like they have these past couple seasons where their offense has been putting up 50 plus points pretty much every week because they can do so many things so well, and they know they can do so many things so well. So they have the confidence to carry them into those football games, understanding that, hey, we can put up 56, we can put up 52, we can put up 60 points because we've done it before. We know we've got the guys and the scheme to do it. And because they know those things, they can actually go out there and do it. It's a lot easier when you're telling yourself, I've done this before, than to do it for the first time. The first time is always the hardest. And so once you get that out of the way, you can really start to see this offense flourish, which is something that we're going to have to monitor going forward, is how effective this offense continues to look in the weeks to come. And defensively, once again, everybody showed up to play this past week. Leander did not have a long full field drive until the end of the game when everything was out of reach. They had the one touchdown, the first drive of the game, where they got the half field on the onside kick. Then they had the kick return touchdown. Outside of that, though, Georgetown's defense really made them earn everything, and they held Leander to 4 different 3 and outs, multiple turnovers on downs. They got 2 sacks, one by Tennyson Dean, one by Quinton Rock, 5 TFLs, the fumble recovery. They excelled in all aspects of the game. And what was most impressive to me was their response after Copper's Cove. Copper's Cove ran the ball for 162 yards and 4.5 an attempt. They held Leander to 86 yards and 3.1 an attempt. So the run defense really honed in on this past bye week. Coming into the week against Leander, that was clearly a focus, was to stop the run, which they had done up until Copper's Cove. And now they bounced back and stopped the run against Leander. So Copper's Cove looking a little bit more like a fluky type situation. And again, Copper's Cove wasn't even dominant on the ground. 4.5 is good, but wasn't an elite rate running the ball. It was just higher than what had been seen from this allowed by this Eagles defense. And so coming back down to earth a little bit in that run defense was super impressive to me. Big shout out to the boys up front. But the secondary was also dominant. They held Mason Montgomery to less than 10 completions on 23 attempts, which is obviously very, very good. Leander could not throw the ball down the field really with any success all game long. And if both phases of the game can play like that, offense and defense, then district is going to have to sleep with one eye open looking for these Eagles, because this type of football game is going to be enough to hang with everybody on their schedule at minimum. And they should be winning a lot of those games if they can play at such an elite offensive and defensive level where they're scoring 9 straight drives. They're stopping everyone from doing anything on the offensive side for their opponent. This is going to be a tough team to beat if they can continue to play at that high level. As far as takeaways, I have 3 big ones. This was a game where you can take a lot away from it. So there's a ton of stuff to draw from. I got some big ideas that I wanted to focus on a little bit more than some of the more smaller things. Firstly was that the bye week to fully integrate Jet back into the starting lineup has clearly worked wonders for this offense. And not even just Walker, but also finding guys like Braden Bratton to step up into that wide receiver void that has really been, I wouldn't really say rotating, but wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 has definitely been a little up in the air at the start of the season, with Xavier established at wide receiver 1. Westfall has really made a strong push to become that wide receiver 2. But even now, I think that because of Braylon Bratton's excellent game, because Colvin Madre is still a scoring machine, scored 2 touchdowns and 2 catches, he's still a dominant weapon outside. I think at this point, we can consider this offense to have not just a stable of very quality running backs, but also receivers, where they can rotate multiple different personnel to get exactly the type of looks they want on offense, because of they can play with speed. They can have Xavier Warren, Westfall, and Bratton on the outside and just fly downfield and challenge defenses vertically. They can also get bigger bodies out there. They can get power. There's a lot of different things that this Georgetown offense can now do because these receivers have really come into their own. In particular, Bratton, Madre, Westfall, the guys that needed to step up into a bigger role this season have all done so. That helps McDougal out. That helps the running backs out. It helps this offense, again, take things to the next level, which we're going to have to look at going forward if they can continue playing at such a high efficiency. But that bye week could not have probably come at a better time to really integrate everything back into this offense and just energize it. And not even that it was lacking energy before, but just to totally revamp it with the district MVP, with the power, the speed, the enthusiasm, the energy that he gives to this football team, and just let it run loose like it did against Leander. That was a heck of a performance by that offense, and something that we're going to have to monitor going forward is whether or not this just continues to scale up. Secondly, Georgetown played mostly 3-phase football, and I'll touch on that mostly here in a minute, but The big takeaway here in regards to how effectively all three aspects of the game played for the most part is the question, which I've asked a couple times now, is can they continue to play at such a high level? That's going to be the question going forward, because I think on this past Friday night, we got very close to seeing this team at its best. We saw an offense that scored every time it needed to. Every time that it was not the end of the game, they scored points. Defense was completely stymieing Leander for the majority of the game until the very end, where they had some backups rotating in. Leander marched off 2 quality drives at the end of that game. They also had, again, the first touchdown drive where they got half the field on onside kick, and then they marched very slowly. Georgetown defense made them earn every inch. They had multiple 4th down conversions that they needed to continue that drive, and then the kick return touchdown, which is special teams. So defense was playing at a very high level. Special teams was a little up and down, and I'll touch on that here in a minute. But that game against Leander, I think, is going to be something that is going to be a benchmark going forward for this team. Can they replicate the success they had in all 3 aspects of the game against Leander? Can they do that next week against Chaparral? Can they do that later in the season against against Cedar Park, against Glen, against all the other teams left on their schedule? Can they continue to not even play at that level, but reach it? Like, if it's a ceiling you're passing by, can you slap it on the way in? Are they getting close to that level, or was this kind of fluky? Was this a one-time miracle performance coming off a bye week? I know they had a lot of energy. This was clearly a game they had circled coming after last year's loss at Leander. Is this going to be a game where they come back down to earth a little bit? There's going to be some stuff we have to monitor with this, but I think going forward, this is going to be that type of game where they'll circle it on their schedule, the coaches will, and they'll tell the guys that this is what we're capable of. This is what we know we can now do. Now let's go do that every week. And I think that the further they get into the season, if they can continue to push that benchmark a little bit higher every week, this is going to be a team that is in total ascension mode coming into the playoffs, which at this point, this looks like a quality team. I think they should be able to make the playoffs. I think everything's still ahead of this football team, and this game against Leander has really solidified that belief for me. And then building off that point, Georgetown has shown that they can win games in a variety of ways at this point. They've won defensively, like at Victoria East. They've won offensively against Copper's Cove, where defense needed some time to kind of hang around and figure themselves out. And then now against Leander, they won using both at a high level. They dominated Leander from start to finish, a blowout win. And again, that means that they can hang with everybody on their schedule if they can play to at least close to their ceiling, and if they can avoid the self-inflicted wounds, which they've been able to do so far this season. There's not been a ton of turnovers from this offense. Hasn't been any sacks yet. Penalties are still marginal, not killing the Eagles. If they can continue at that high efficiency mark, then this team is going to be a very tough out for whoever they play. As far as improvements go, there are 2 that I have that are pretty major and pretty evident if you've watched the Eagles, if you've just listened to this video here. The first one is that the special teams have been an adventure for the Eagles, to say the least. They've had some bad snaps on PATs so far this season, so they went ahead and scrapped PATs the first 3 drives. They went for 2 on their first 3 touchdown drives and ended up converting all 3 when the swinging gate with Walker running for 2-point conversions. And so interesting to note that instead of trying to switch up long snapper, holder, kicker, that sort of thing, they actually just scrapped the PAT there. Now they went back to it with a new kicker, Samuel Gallivays, who hit 2 field goals in the game. He looked very comfortable out there. But that is something to note going forward, whether or not that's going to be a consistent theme of those 2-point conversion attempts. If it was just to try to get this new kicker's legs underneath him with some kicks later in the game where they didn't need him, that sort of thing. So going to be something to monitor. But going forward, 2-point conversions, I think, might be here to stay just because they worked so well. But other than that, the kickoff has also been a special teams issue for the Eagles on both sides. Kick coverage has struggled for multiple weeks. They allowed a touchdown here against Leander. Leander averaged 36 yards a kick return, which is nuts. They also had a long kick return 2 weeks ago against Copper's Cove, the final drive of the game, if you remember, that really tried to spark Copper's Cove's last-ditch effort to go back and tie or win that game late. Now, Georgetown's defense able to stop them and end up winning the game for the Eagles, but this has been an issue throughout the season. The opponents are averaging over 20 yards a kick return on average, whereas the kick return for the Eagles are barely averaging over 10, and they only average 7 against Leander, which is really interesting because Georgetown has a lot of speed type guys back there to receive those kicks. And so whether it's a lane discipline or gap discipline, or maybe just not executing wherever they're attempting to block through, whatever the case may be, the kickoff has been a struggle. So we're going to have to try to see some adjustments going forward, and whether or not how they want to play that, if they're going to continue to try to do onsides more consistently, if they want to just kick it out of bounds to avoid kickoffs or kick returns entirely. Going to be a lot of different moving parts there. Secondly, scrambling quarterbacks have also been probably the lone blemish on this defense. They've consistently pounded Georgetown's defense, and against scrambling quarterbacks are the most difficult thing to guard in football because they can beat you with their arm, they can beat you with their legs. They force split-second decisions out of everybody on that defense, and if you're wrong, they're going to go make a play. And so it asks a lot of any defense to go stop these guys. But scrambling quarterbacks have consistently hurt Georgetown's defense. In particular, these last 3 games they've had. Belton's quarterback, Will Shepard, had 13 carries, 58 yards, and a score. Craig Davis, quarterback for Copper's Cove, had 12 carries, 60 yards, and 3 scores. And then Mason Montgomery this past week against Leander had 12 carries, 50 yards, and 2 scores. So the yardage there is not awful. That's not going to break you. But the big stuff is the goal line packages where they're able to run it in, where the clear success with how many touchdowns quarterbacks are scoring on the Eagles, and also the fact that they're able to oftentimes escape negative plays, especially in particular that Belton game about a month ago now. There were multiple times where Shepard was dead to rights, and the Eagles were really close to getting a sack and setting back that offense, and he was able to escape and not only not take negative yardage, but actually get positive yardage on plays. Those are the type of stuff that really hurts that defense because you have them and you're about to get them behind the sticks, behind the chains, and they're able to escape and create, and they'll find either a throw down the field or create with their legs. Those are the type of stuff that really hurts teams. So going to have to look at that going forward if they're going to try to play more QB spy, more QB contain, if it's just a lane and gap discipline off the edges, what they want to do trying to stop these scrambling quarterbacks. Because in the modern age, the majority of quarterbacks you will face are going to be guys who can move. There's not going to be a whole lot of pure pocket passers left nowadays because of how the game has evolved to allow these scrambling quarterbacks to just really excel with the ball in their hands on offense. And so kids growing up are going to be scramblers, they're going to be faster, they're going to be more mobile, more agile, and more difficult for defenses to handle. And so again, not easy to stop. Scrambling quarterbacks are a nightmare for any defense. So we're going to have to just note the changes that will be made on defense because I expect them to eventually adjust to this with a different philosophy. And whether or not it works is another question. But I do think Georgetown's defense will try to focus on some key aspects in regards to how to stop scrambling quarterbacks, in particular whenever we're facing a guy who's really mobile, like we will be this week against Chaparral. Speaking of Chaparral, this brings me to our look ahead to Thursday night, not Friday Night Lights this week, Thursday Night Lights at Killeen Chaparral. The Bobcats are 2-2 so far this season. They won their first 2 games, have dropped their most recent 2. They had a close loss against Lampasas 3 weeks ago rather. Had a bye, came out of the bye, and then got bludgeoned by Cedar Park. They lost the game 57-14. And what's really interesting about their schedule in particular is they've actually not played a home game in over a month. The entire month of September, they had 2 away games, a bye, and then they were at Cedar Park. So now they're coming back home to host your Eagles on Thursday night. Again, their first home game in over a month, which I might have some complaints to the schedule makers about that. But they have not looked overly dominant in any aspect of the game. And when I say that, it's a little interesting because they are still 2-2. They had 2 big wins in out of conference against Lehman and Manor New Tech. Lost close to Lampasas by 1, 13-12, and again had that blowout loss to Cedar Park. But this is not a team that's been entirely dominant on offense. They don't have a running back or a wide receiver who's averaging 70 yards a game. Their quarterback is barely averaging 150 passing yards a game, but he is dual threat. He had on the season, his name's Bryson Coleman. He has 23 carries, 136 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. In the air, he's completed 60% for about 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. Which again aren't amazing passing numbers, but it's that rushing aspect that's going to be that other element that really is, I imagine, what they're going to lean on offensively is in that run game, that QB run, the running back run, and trying to keep things on the ground to slow the game down to keep the ball away from Georgetown. So while their offense has not been totally explosive, their defense has been pretty stingy. They held their first 3 opponents to 43 combined points before, again, Cedar Park kind of came in and had their way with them. So the big question coming into this game is whether or not that Cedar Park game was a fluke or a sign of things to come for this Bobcat team. Cedar Park had 57. Their running back, Trey Samuel, had 24 carries for 220 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he dominated that game against the Bobcats. So look for Georgetown to get the ball to any of the running backs, but in particular, Jet Walker, and test that Chaparral defense to see, okay, was this a fluke this past week against Cedar Park, or did Cedar Park expose something that we're going to take advantage of in the run game? We're just feeding our best players up back in the backfield, giving them the ball, letting them go to work, and then immediately starting to test and strain that defense for Chaparral. I expect a lot of that. And then, again, offensively, is that quarterback scramble. Can Georgetown's defense contain the QB scramble and contain that run game? Because if they can, this offense for Chaparral throwing the ball has not been dominant. It has not really found itself yet. If you remember correctly, actually, when I was talking about the MVPs, Caleb McDougall in the past 2 weeks has had more passing yards than the Bobcats have had all season. And so just to give a little bit more context in regards to how the levels which these teams are operating at, Chaparral's still trying to find that passing game offensively. And so there's going to be some questions that both teams are going to ask each other, but I expect Georgetown to come in with that game plan of running the ball, smash mouth football offensively, and then defensively stopping the run and forcing Chaparral to prove they can throw the ball to beat them. So that will do it for me here. We had a lot to get through, and we get through it as we always do. At the time of recording this, the first episode has actually already dropped, so please go watch that if you haven't already. The next 2 will be coming out shortly. Post-production is always a challenge. Technical difficulties always a challenge. So we're trying to figure all this stuff out on the fly, so please bear with us. But thank you for watching anyway. Thank you for reaching the end of this video if you have. And again, please leave your comments below. Any set of suggestions, any critiques, any comments, all that stuff. Would love to read them. This is a growing show. This is not going to stay consistent every week. I'm just trying to find a rhythm right now, so again, any suggestions, leave them below. I'll read them, and I'll make a note of them going forward. And lastly, tune in to the First Responders Broadcasting channel on the SHN YouTube channel. We've got the game this Thursday, not Friday. And then going forward, it will be on Friday. We've got Coach's Show. We've got this, which ideally will be a weekly thing. And so a lot of good stuff happening for Georgetown Athletics, and this is the best place to find it. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you Thursday night at Killeen Chaparral, and then going forward, Friday nights. And as always, it doesn't cost a dime to be kind, as the great Wally Harmon would say. EFND, Eagle Fight Never Dies, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.